troubleshooting and maintenance on your Tippmann Boss hand stitcher. The troubleshooting portion of this instructional video is meant to serve as an aid in working on a few of the most common maintenance issues which may occur with your Boss hand stitcher from time to time. This section of the video is intended to answer some of the questions you may have on basic operational functions of the machine. For example, how do I start and finish locking a stitch? Here's a list of the items that we're going to cover in this portion of the video. We'll cover the items in the same order as they appear on the screen. How do I start and finish locking a stitch? I seem to be missing stitches. What do I do? My thread seems to be binding or jamming. What should I do? My thread is jamming or double looping. How do I fix this? I have checked my tension, but my thread is still jamming and double looping. What should I do? What should I do if my thread is binding or jamming when I'm sewing nylon or biothane? I think my timing may be off. What should I do? My thread is fraying. How do I stop it from fraying? What should I do if I'm missing stitches while sewing sheepskin? How do I install my needle foot? I need to replace my rack gear. How do I go about doing this? Problem: how do I start and finish locking a stitch? You'll want to make sure that your Boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance on your machine. Clamp your machine down. Start on the material about 1/4 of an inch from where you'd normally start. Sew to where you'd normally start. Then turn your material around and sew back through the previous holes and continue on. When at the end of your stitch line, lift your presser foot and move your material back to line up your needle with the previous hole, and then repeat. That concludes this step. Problem: I seem to be missing stitches. What do I do? You'll want to make sure that your Boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp machine down. First, make sure that you're using the correct needle size for the thread that you're using. The size will be etched in the needle and on the bottom of the spool of thread. Next, if the needle size and thread size are correct, try turning your needle to the left or to the right a couple of degrees, using the Allen wrench provided in your accessory kit. If you're still missing, you'll want to adjust your rack stop 1 to 2 full turns. First, remove your back cover. Next, loosen the nut. Then, turn your bolt 1 to 2 full turns. You'll then replace your back cover. That concludes this step. My thread is binding or jamming. You'll want to make sure that your Boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp your machine down. If your thread is binding or jamming, the first thing you should do is check your tensions. You'll want to check both your secondary and primary tension settings. Secondary tension should be at 2 full turns from the time the nut touches the spring. First, back the nut off until it is no longer touching the spring. Primary tension should be set at 1½ turns from the time the nut touches the spring. First, back the nut off until it is no longer touching the spring. That concludes this step. Problem: my thread is jamming or double looping. What should I do? You'll want to make sure that your Boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp your machine down. If your thread is jamming, the first thing you should do is check your tensions. You'll want to check both your secondary and primary tensions. First, back the nut off until it is no longer touching the spring. Secondary tension should be set at 2 full turns from the time the nut touches the spring. Primary tension should be set at 1.5 turns from the time the nut touches the spring. That concludes this step. I've checked my tension, but my thread is still jamming and double looping. What should I do? You'll want to make sure that your boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp your machine down. Make sure the lever thread take-up is coming up all the way. Take thread out of the needle. Hold stitching handle all the way forward while keeping your hand on the stitching handle. Apply pressure against the handle. Then, with your other hand, try to move the lever thread take-up up and down. If the lever thread take-up moves up and down while applying pressure against the handle, remove the back cover, look for the shaft needle bar. On the shaft itself, there will be a bracket. You'll find the arm bracket thread take-up attached to the roller. When pressure is being applied to the handle, the roller should be touching the bottom of the thread take-up arm. If the roller's not touching the bottom of the thread take-up arm, loosen the bolt that goes through the thread take-up bracket 2 to 3 turns and rotate until it touches. You'll then want to retighten the bolt that goes through the thread take-up arm bracket. That concludes this step. What should I do if my thread is binding or jamming when I'm sewing nylon or biothane? You'll want to make sure that your boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp your machine down. When sewing nylon or biothane, your thread tensions are going to be different. You'll want your secondary and primary tensions very tight. You may have to experiment by turning your adjustment a couple of times. You'll want your bobbin tension to be very loose. If you're still having problems, go to a larger needle. You'll want to try 1 to 2 sizes larger than the needle you're using. You should then try wrapping the thread another time on secondary and primary tensioners. That concludes this step. I think my timing may be off. What should I do? You'll want to make sure that your boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp your machine down. Make sure that the tip of the long ear on the shuttle driver is right at or right before 12 o'clock when the stitching handle is all the way forward. That concludes this step. Problem: my thread is fraying. How do I stop it from fraying? First, check your thread and make sure you're using a nylon or polyester thread. If your thread is nylon or polyester, check to see if the thread is already frayed off the spool. If the thread is frayed off the spool, call the retailer where you purchased the thread and let them know. If your thread is not frayed off the spool, you may need to make a minor adjustment to your Boss hand stitcher. Call our toll-free line 866-286-8046 and speak with a technician. What should I do if I'm missing stitches on sheepskin? If you're missing stitches while sewing sheepskin, put a piece of duct tape over the needle plate. This will help to keep the wool out of the cover area. You'll also want to cut a slot into the tape directly into the slot in the needle plate. That concludes this step. Problem: how do I install my needle foot? You'll want to make sure that your boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. Clamp your machine down. Remove needle from needle bar. Remove presser foot. Remove needle plate. Remove the 2 retainer ring screws and the retainer ring. You'll notice the shuttle comes out with the ring. Remove the 4 front cover screws and the front cover. Pull the stitching handle down. Remove the 5/64 set screw located above the slot window in the needle bar. Hold the needle foot while raising the stitching handle, then remove the needle foot with the spring. You'll then replace the spring and needle foot. Place your small standard screwdriver in slotted window on top of spring and push needle foot up. Then replace 5/64 set screw. The final step is to replace all other parts. Replace front cover, replace the shuttle and retainer ring by first placing shuttle into retainer ring, then putting retainer ring back on. Replace needle plate. Note: do not lock down all the way. Leave it a bit loose. Replace presser foot. Replace needle. Finally, once your needle is in, align needle in the center of the slot on the needle plate. That concludes this step. I need to replace my rack gear. How do I go about doing this? You'll want to make sure that your boss is on a sturdy work surface while performing any setup or maintenance. You'll need to turn your machine around. Pop off the back cover. Clamp your machine down. Take off the handle bolt. Remove the handle. You may have to tap with a rubber mallet. Take off gear bolt. Turn machine around. Clamp machine down. Go to the front cover. Remove 4 front cover bolts. Remove snap ring with snapping pliers. Remove cam presser foot. You'll then want to remove the drive presser foot cam. Note: spring will come off. Remove springs off the lifting arm. Next, you'll remove the lifting arm presser foot. Take a small rubber mallet. Then, while holding the needle bar, tap the needle bar shaft. Next, with a punch 5/32 or larger, apply to back of needle bar shaft. Tap the needle bar shaft until it's flush or slightly recessed with the casting. Now your AR-10M gear will pop off. Loosen the SM-103 screw that holds the keeper rack. Note: rack keeper will swing out of the way. Remove the rack assembly. After you've received your new rack assembly, make sure that the 2 pieces of the rack assembly are offset. If they're not offset, loosen the AR102 screw. If they are offset, there's no need to loosen the screw. Now, you'll want to tighten the screw back up. Install new rack gear. Allen head should be facing you. Make sure that the tip of the rack gear is touching flat washer and hold in place. While holding the rack gear in place, make sure the tip of the long ear on the driver shuttle is at 12 o'clock. If the long ear is not at 12 o'clock, pull the rack gear out toward you. With the other hand, rotate the driver to get the tip around 12 o'clock, then shove the gear back in. Retighten the rack keeper. Reinstall gear needle shaft. Count up 13 slots on rack gear from where the two pieces join together. Mark this slot. This will be the 12th tooth and the 13th slot. Take AR10M gear, go to the 13th slot on the rack gear, hold the AR10M gear on, make sure the rack is all the way up. Take a rubber mallet and line up 10M gear with the hole in the casting, and then tap the needle shaft, making sure that the arm and the AR27 knuckle are lined up. Take the HS103 bolt and line it back up with the hole in the AR10M and the hole in the needle shaft. Screw bolt back in. Put presser foot lifting arm back on. Reattach spring. Replace cam driver by first putting spring over hook, then putting spring pin on AR29. Next, put the AR29 over the AR28 pin. You'll then replace the cam, replace the snap ring, replace front cover, replace handle, replace back cover. That concludes this step. If you're experiencing a problem not included in this troubleshooting guide, please feel free to call us toll-free at 866-286-8046.